Welcome, Dr. Gibbs. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Yeah, me too. We've been kind of circling around one another online, and it's really beautiful to connect directly. I want to just give a little introduction and then you can add to it as you wish. So, Dr. Gibbs is an educator, hormone expert, board certified ENT, and allergist. She recently retired from her ENT practice and opened Consultants in Metabolism, a direct care practice for thyroid, metabolic, and hormone management for women and men. The practice is located in North Texas and offers live and virtual visits. Anything that you want to add to that before I ask my many questions for you?
No, not really. Well, okay. So one little thing, because I also have a course for people who want to optimize their hormones, and then I also sponsor, I'm not the teacher of it, but I also sponsor a course for doctors who want to learn the kind of stuff that I know, and that's a lot of
Okay,
fun too.
that's wonderful. I love how you have so many tiers of contribution from your wisdom and experience. So, for your course for people who want to manage their hormones, who exactly is that for? Like, what kind of question, what kind of experience would they be having such that the answers lie in your course?
Wow. So it's pretty broad, but the entry problem is usually someone who has fatigue or depression or other symptoms, typically of low thyroid. And they go to their doctor and they say, "Doctor, I'm having all these symptoms." And the doctor checks their TSH and says, "Well, your labs are normal. How about this antidepressant?" And if they don't want to do that because they're really convinced that there's something wrong that's not just what you need an antidepressant for, then a lot of them will come to me. And um, mostly the course is the kind of recommendations that I give to people throughout the medical visits that I give. But there's so much that people can do with over the counters and supplements and diet changes. So that's a lot of what my course is.
Okay, just hearing you talk and my sense of you, I'm reminded of the Latin origins of the word doctor, which actually means teacher. And I think you
Mm,
really live out the teacher aspect in being a doctor so beautifully.
thank you. That's hit the nail on the head there because I really, when I think somebody needs what I know, I pretty much can't shut up. it's
Okay,
it's kind of it's kind of an affliction actually.
okay, I'm familiar with that, but let's run with it and transition to talking about stress. Now, I have some important questions about stress, but before I say them, I'd love to hear what you mean by stress. And one of the contexts for my question is there are a lot of words that are used casually in conversation, and then they have a very particular meaning when doctors use them. I think an example is lethargy. You know, if a layperson says, "Oh, you know, my child is lethargic," then that means one thing. If a doctor says this child is lethargic, that means a whole other set of things
Oh,
that
then we're jumping to the what are we going to do about it? Oh no.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
And I think of stress similarly. It's a word that is so frequently used, and there are medical definitions of stress, and they're more casual. Oh, I'm so stressed out when actually everything is fine, and then there's oh, I'm stressed out when things are not fine. So, h- how do you use the word stress?
Well, that's very interesting the way you described it when you said, "Oh, I'm so stressed out, but things are actually fine," and they're so stressed out that but things are actually not fine. because truthfully, the definition of stress is anything that the human who is experiencing it experiences as a negative, and I hate to go in a circle and say stressful, but who
We're not in
experiences.
English class. It's permitted.
Right. But it's like, okay, so I got to take a step back. So primitively, you have parts of your brain, you have the cortex, the thinking part, and then you have the more primitive part of your brain. And when the primitive part of your brain reacts to something that happens, and that something that happened can be the car that nearly hits you in the intersection, or it can be the thought that you have in your head of, oh my gosh, my mom is coming over and she is going to criticize me because the house is messy. I mean, both of those things, your body cannot tell the difference between those two things. They both trigger the same physical response in your body. And, we call that the stress response. But yeah, so stress can be, back in primitive times, stress was famine or war or the tiger coming after you, or the ants that invaded your cave and made it impossible to live there anymore, or getting taken captive and made a slave. There's all kinds of ancient stress, and some of it was quick and, okay, the lion's gone, we drove him away, he's gone, but your body's still like, no, he's still out there, oh my gosh. There's that, and then there's the more chronic stressors of like famine, for example. And in the modern context, we don't really have either of those things. We don't really have tigers running after us, and we don't really have famine, but we have, money stress, we have relationship stress, we have the diet culture. Oh my gosh, diet culture is so stressful to the people who buy into it, because you think, oh my gosh, I've got to lose these pounds, I've got to starve myself. Your body doesn't care whether you're purposely starving yourself or whether there's literally no food to eat. Your body feels that stress the same and reacts to that stress the same. So I don't know if that answers your
It
question,
really does.
but yeah, but stress is really anything that your body perceives as a threat to your well-being.
I'm really touched by what you've shared, because there's a way that I talk about this in the context of relationship coaching. And there's a couple that I'm currently coaching, and I spoke to him about how there are no lions, tigers, and bears. Like, this is your wife who loves you. And yes, she doesn't like how you did that, but there's no lion that's about to attack you. And
Yeah.
they don't reside there, but they're in Israel right now for a number of
Oh
months.
goodness.
And
Yeah.
so in late October, when I coached them, he said to me, now there are lions. Like,
Yeah.
he's not safe.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I found remarkable is that he actually is more mentally, emotionally equipped to navigate that than he previously was the stressors in his relationship. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
minimizing the challenge he's in, and maybe his learning to be more in control of himself in his relationship has helped. Anyway, we don't need to discuss
Mm-hmm.
that further, but it just made me think of that when you said that. So, given your very beautiful, accessible description of stress, please share how, when we have elevated stress levels, whether it's financial, it's body image, it's a child being annoying, it's our spouse, it's something complicated at work, whatever it is, how do, or, bombs falling, whatever it is, how
Yeah.
to, maybe I should take that outside to keep the conversation more focused, but how do elevated stress levels impact our hormones? And in the normal course of living, how is this related to the symptoms of midlife?
Sure, absolutely. So first, I need to explain a little bit about what happens with the acute stress reaction. And the classic is the lion is chasing you or whatever. And so when something happens, and maybe it's not a lion, maybe it's the guy in the traffic that just cut you off, and your heart rate goes up, and you just get all tense, and your heart is beating rapidly, and then maybe if it was a real near miss, then maybe you're shaking after a few yeah, after a few seconds, and that's the first part of a stress response is adrenaline, and that is totally and utterly not something you think about. It is from your brainstem to your spinal cord to your adrenal glands and back, and boom, your body is full of adrenaline, and that's what bumps your heart rate up and everything. And so, for somebody who gets triggered, whether it's by a loud noise, or somebody startles you, or your wife is angry, or whatever, it's the same adrenaline. Boom, it happens. And then within 30 seconds, your body is then putting out cortisol. And cortisol is the stress hormone. It's made by your adrenal glands. And, it's within 30 seconds, it starts. And it takes hours to days for that to fade down. Now, the point of cortisol, and I'm not trying to infer that cortisol is in and of itself a bad thing. You need cortisol to live. So let's talk a little bit about what cortisol does. Well, okay, so it raises your heart rate, it raises your blood pressure, it shoots blood flow to your muscles, it raises your blood sugar so your muscles will have more energy so that you can fight, or so that you can run, or or help yourself survive, because that's what it's for. Um, if you don't have cortisol, for example, if you're late for your flight and you're having to run to your gate, if you didn't have cortisol in your body, your blood sugar would drop so low by the time you got to your gate, you might drop dead. I mean, it is crucial in your body. You have to have cortisol. But the problem happens when the stress perception becomes chronic, and it's okay, I am not safe in my home because my child is oppositional defiant and he might lash out and hit me, or the principal's going to call and tell me that he bit another child, or something. If you're just in this chronically elevated vigilant state, which starts with the adrenaline and then continues with the high cortisol, that becomes really maladaptive, and it starts to feed on itself, and it does a lot of stuff that's really not good for you, because chronically elevated cortisol raises your levels of body insulin, and insulin, when it's high, not only does it cause you to have more unstable blood sugar, so you can, if you don't eat often enough, you can go hypoglycemic, but it also increases your anxiety level. It increases your potential to be depressed. It increases weight gain. So there's just all kinds of negative things that just come from that one part of things, of the cortisol feeding forward to insulin, raising insulin, and then insulin feeding back and raising cortisol even more. So that's one thing. The other thing that it does is when your adrenals are busy shooting out lots and lots of cortisol all the time, it's not doing its other jobs. And it has a couple of other jobs, which are to produce sex hormones, particularly DHEA and pregnenolone, which we need for producing estrogen, testosterone, etc. And also aldosterone, which is another you can't live without it hormone. That's the one that keeps your blood pressure up normal. And so one of the symptoms of really chronic stress where somebody might actually start running out of reserve in their adrenal glands is this: you get up too fast and you start feeling dizzy, or you pee every 30 minutes all night long because your body doesn't have enough aldosterone, and so you're having to get up and drink water, and your aldosterone is what keeps that water in your body so that your blood pressure stays up. So those are a couple of other things. And then a third one is that very, very high cortisol can feed back and mess up your thyroid, which is about the point that most people end up seeing me. Because if you don't have enough thyroid hormone, or if you don't have the right balance of thyroid hormones in your body, that's yet another way to get depressed. It's another way to feel tired, and feeling tired kind of turns around and makes you feel depressed even more. It can make you feel cold all the time. It can make you want to sleep all the time. You can kind of lose interest in exercise because you just don't have enough energy to do those things. And so all this chronic stress really does have physical effects in your body, and it just makes you feel worse all around.
I'm sure your
Sorry, that was
course.
probably more of an answer than you
No,
wanted.
no, no. I was just thinking about how amazing your course must be given the clarity and comprehensiveness of your answers. So I do want to just share that one of the things I was thinking while you were speaking is that, oh, so many nights I'll get into bed and not feel particularly sexual at all. And my
Mm-hmm.
husband, who knows me well, will say, "Would you like a massage?" And I'll say,
Ha 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 ha
"Yes."
ha ha.
And let's be very clear, that's not a sexual massage. And if he touches me in a way that feels like there's an agenda in it, then this does not work. We both know this. But if he's
Yeah.
just literally generous, massaging me in a way that, in the context of this conversation, I would say reduces the cortisol, then
Yes.
it's really barely a degrees pivot from there, from that relaxation, to turn
Mm-hmm.
and be ready for something that I'm just not ready for unless he massages. And it's not foreplay. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just that
No.
it reduces the stress so that my body is available for other things. So I just wanted to share that as a super practical application of what you've described. And one of my first questions with what you've shared is this. So you've described the cascade of stressful stimuli leading to adrenaline, leading to cortisol, leading to lower aldosterone, DHE, and so on and so on and so forth, to lower thyroid, causing
Mm-hmm.
symptoms irregardless of the stressful stimulus. So
Yeah.
is I mean, treating thyroid is not what my question is about. Is
No, of
the,
course not.
like, the ideal scenario, the best prevention, the best way to have balanced and appropriate insulin levels and cortisol and sex hormones and so forth, to remove the stressful stimulus? Or,
Not.
which we obviously can't control, so even just to change how stressful that stimulus is for us? Or
Mm-hmm.
are there interventions at various places? My question is do we want to go upstream to attend to this, or are there interventions along the way?
Okay. Yes. So before I answer your question, I need to go back into the science just a tiny bit, and talk about something called sympathetic tone. And sympathetic tone sounds like a great thing, but it's actually not. So what sympathetic tone is part of your involuntary nervous system, and it's basically the level of your threat receptors. If you can think of it this way. So if you live in a neighborhood where there are lions running around loose, then
Or
your sympathetic
gunshots on a
tone,
regular basis.
or gunshots on a regular basis, or a spouse who drinks and flies off the handle sometimes
Mhm.
and you just
Mhm.
never know when, that chronic stress raises what's called sympathetic tone. And what sympathetic tone is kind of just a little bit higher baseline level of it just makes the trigger a little lighter so that it takes less to get that shot of adrenaline going in your brain or in your body. And the higher your sympathetic tone is, the more chronically anxious you are. And so, yeah, you want to do things that lower your sympathetic tone, but it's silly to think that we can just put our heads in the sand and ignore everything that's going on around us. It's not possible. I mean, you and I both went through residencies. We know what stress is. you know we know what stress is, but there's lots of people who didn't go through that, who are just as stressed or maybe even more stressed than we are, because they came from an environment that wasn't safe. I will just say, I personally do not watch the news anymore. I figure if something's important enough that I need to hear about it, somebody's going to tell me, oh, okay, there's bombings going on here and there in the world, and I need to get out my checkbook and write a check to this aid organization, or Lahaina's burning. I need to I need to get out my checkbook and do what I can, that kind of thing. But I don't watch the news anymore, because the news is deliberately there to provoke that stress response in you. That's how they get their money. And so that's one thing. I
I
have
want to
given up.
interject something, if I may, that
Okay.
this is something that is so important in childhood also. And people often think, well, as long as it's children's programming, it's okay. But cartoons, like the most seemingly benign shows, they are all activating adrenaline also in our children. And I mean,
I think I think that's probably, I don't watch children's programming because I really don't watch TV at all. But I would say you're probably exactly right about that.
I had the
Um,
privilege of growing up without a television, and I was born in
mhm,
1968, so there was no internet or personal computers or anything, of course. But so when I did start watching things, I was old enough to be aware of what was happening.
mhm,
I think the first time I saw a movie, it was in a movie theater, and I was 12, and it was this G-rated animal thing, and I was sweating and petrified because, like, to see this animal up close, I
mhm.
just I hadn't built up a tolerance, and I
Yeah.
didn't have a certain level of stress hormone from that kind of stimulus in my
Mhm.
system. So we don't need to talk about that more. I just wanted to emphasize the relevance in every phase of life, in every circumstance.
Exactly. Well, okay, so you were talking about massage,
Yeah.
and I would say that there are several techniques or several activities that people can do that will lower your sympathetic tone. And I would say massage and touch in particular, and it doesn't have to be touch in an intimate way, but just hugs, or you know grab somebody by the hand and give them a squeeze, and or eye contact, or something like that. So that's one thing that's really uh, helping down regulate sympathetic tone. A few other ones are exercise. yoga in particular, where you really have to be thinking about what you're doing, because if not, you're going to fall over while you're doing it, where your brain is not thinking about the meeting you have tomorrow, or the fact that your boss is not going to give you the day off that you wanted, or whatever, where your brain is engaged in a physical pursuit. I love dance for that reason. I love like ballroom dancing or ballet or and I mentioned yoga, but any physical exercise that you're doing that requires a degree of mental effort
Hmm.
as well as physical effort is going to really help you down regulate your sympathetic tone. Um, Now, I do want to put a caveat about exercise there, because when you are you can over exercise and actually increase your cortisol levels. And I know we've all heard about elite athletes who don't have periods. Well, the reason they don't have periods is because the stress of all the exercise that they do has basically taken their adrenals offline to produce sex hormones, and so they just stop cycling. So that's another one. Um, let's see some other ones. So meditation is phenomenal. And any form of mindfulness, be it prayer, be it meditation, be it whatever works for you. Reading something inspirational, those would be phenomenal ways to lower your stress level. And then I really strongly believe in coaching. I have to say that before I had encountered coaching, and I first encountered it wasn't that long ago. I think it was in the year 2000, so only about 3 years ago. The concept that the thoughts in my head might not be true, the thoughts that I think about myself, that those might not be true. Oh, you suck. You're late again. How come you can't get your shit together? The little act of thinking those thoughts creates stress for me. And for people who are very, very perfectionistic and very hard on themselves, they're creating their own stress. The other one is worrying about, oh my gosh, what if I get cancer? Oh my gosh, what if we run out of money and can't pay the bills? Oh my gosh, what happens if we miss our plane? Thinking about things that haven't happened yet. And it can be anything. It could be related to a relationship. It could be almost anything. Thinking and focusing your attention on things that you do not want to happen is a terrible way to spend your time. And it raises your stress level
Yes.
phenomenally. Much, much better to think about, just turn it around and go, okay, what can I do to make sure we don't miss our plane? Instead of, oh my gosh, what if we miss our plane? Don't think about the bad consequence. Think about, I'm going to make sure that we get to this vacation on time. It's just a much better way to go about it. Eating, and you're going to think this is dumb, but eating processed and sugary foods, which spikes that insulin. I mean, even if you're not a diabetic, even if,
I don't
even if you,
I don't think it's dumb.
um,
Just for the record,
okay, it's
I
not
don't
dumb.
think it's dumb.
Okay, well, good. But anything that you eat that raises your insulin level also raises your cortisol more. It raises your stress level more. It increases your likelihood of being anxious. It increases your likelihood of being depressed. Eating real food, and I heard something fun the other day that made me perk up, and I was like, this is great. Eat what a caveman would recognize as food.
Yes.
Eat a carrot, eat an
Well,
egg, eat, some leaves, eat, you know, not something that comes wrapped in cellophane and laced with sugar
yeah,
and corn
the
syrup.
way that
And
I've encountered that, and often adhered to is not cavemen because there wasn't agriculture. I mean, I guess they'd know what a carrot is, but not because they'd
Yeah,
seen one before. But even just as simply as don't eat anything that didn't exist when your grandparents were born. I guess I heard that
perfect.
in the
Yeah.
90s, so that might not be true anymore. But
Hmm.
basically any food that didn't exist in 1900, be
Yeah.
suspicious.
Yeah. Well, I guess another way to put it would be you can eat anything that was produced on a farm, that's fine. If it was produced in a factory, not so much.
Yes, yes, exactly.
But anyway, but the reason why that works is because it spikes your insulin.
Mhm.
And insulin and cortisol are directly related to one another.
I really enjoy that you're both high level in the science and super practical all at the same time. It's really beautiful to discuss these things with you because
Thank you.
like there isn't any specific thing that was unfamiliar to me personally, but I feel like my understanding of the whole thing is so much deeper. It's
Oh,
really
thank you.
wonderful. Is there anything else that you want to make sure to include as we wrap up?
Sure. So just one last thing, and that is the fact that all of the effects of stress get worse as you approach and go into menopause. And the reason for that is that in order for women to cycle, it takes higher and higher levels of estrogen to keep your menstrual cycles normal as you head towards menopause for some reason. And it's has to do with the LH surge and some things like that that aren't really important right this second. But so you need more and more estrogen, but you actually have less and less as you go towards menopause. And unfortunately, less and less estrogen also equals more and more insulin resistance, which means that your body, just to digest the normal food that you used to eat without any problem 10 years ago, now requires more and more insulin. And we already talked about the bad things that insulin does. And so it results in more depression, more weight gain, more sleep deprivation. Um, and if that's not enough, then it also, you know, results in some sexual symptoms that I'm sure you're extremely familiar with. That's even before the stress. But if you add stress on top of it, then that impairs your body's ability to make estrogen even more. And so it becomes this vicious cycle that just makes itself get worse and worse. The closer you get to menopause, the more important it is to manage your stress.
I understand about managing stress. Are you in the camp of thinking that basically all women should go on hormone replacement preventatively?
That is a huge can of worms. And I don't know that I would say preventatively because I really believe in testing. As you hit your 40s, it's not a bad idea to get baseline studies done to see, okay, where are my estrogen levels? Where is my normal? Get tested for FSH and LH, which are the brain hormones that tell your body to make sex hormones, just so you have a baseline. And then if you start feeling down and depressed and tired, go back and have them checked again. And if you're at half of where you were before, then that's a symptom. It doesn't have to be a hot flash. Although hot flashes are terrible, I have to tell you, they are terrible and people make fun of them. And it's like, I don't know if you've ever tried to sleep while you're roasting 1 minute and freezing the next and drenched in sweat. How can you sleep like that? It's just like, if somebody has hot flashes, heck yeah, they ought to be being treated. If they're manifesting some of these more subtle symptoms, they should at least get tested. And I am an early adopter because I just, and like I said, it's a topic for another day, but there's just so many effects that we think of that are just aging that can be stopped with hormone replacement. And so, yeah, I would say not for everybody, but for the majority of people, yes.
I definitely see why you have so many women physicians who are your patients. That makes so much sense to me. How can people find you if they'd like to follow up and learn more
Sure. So,
and perhaps become a client or patient?
so my website is www.danagibbsmd.com. And on there is a link to both of my courses and also to my medical practice. Also on there are all of the videos. I do a video series. I do every week a different topic um, regarding some aspect of hormones or weight loss or this or that. So all of those videos are available on my website. And then the links to the courses are all there as well. I was going to say I'm on all the socials as danagibbsmd.com as well.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I am so grateful for our conversation, both for me personally and for everyone who listens. And I'm certainly going to look at more of your videos. So thank you
Awesome.
so much for this conversation.
You are so welcome. And thank you very much for having me. This has been great fun. And hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Sounds really good.